Hi, welcome to Whirlwind Wargaming. So I'm going to do a new series of unboxing builds where we'll have a look at different boxes, open them up, see what the value is and build them up. So please like and subscribe, give me some comments and we'll take a look at this one then. So this is the Getting Started with Warhammer 40k. It's like a magazine which has got some models in there. So this has been produced by Games Workshop. We'll flip it over and look on the back. It's got like a build, read, paint, showcase, next steps. That's probably giving you some indication of what's inside, and it says it contains 2 miniatures. So inside this little cardboard envelope then we've got a magazine and a small box, which I'm assuming the miniatures are in. So we'll, it's got that typical Leviathan Terminator sort of cover to the front, and inside this box we've got a little sprue with the 2 models on there. So yeah, this is a bit of a lighter weight sprue, very similar to the sort of blind box marines you can get in 8 to a tray, or like they're about £6 per blind box that they've produced. They've got sort of pre-molded bases, and they look all push fit, so that looks like a bolt pistol there. I think it's an Infernus Marine looking at that. Yeah, it's a prior cannon. And we've got a Termagant with, I think, a flesh borer, is it? So yeah, this magazine is £12.50 from Games Workshop. You can pick it up for around about sort of £10.60 there-ish online, and there will be P&P attached to that, unless you go over sort of the minimum order level. So open up the contents then. Yeah, a lot of this looks very familiar. So if you've already got some of the Warhammer rules, or you've looked online, there's a how to build. That might just be one page of the how to build. Yeah, just the one page of the how to build there. So yeah, we look at our sprue. We've got, yeah, okay, it's a lot of this stuff looks very familiar. Drakuri, Aldari, the Tau Empire. So yeah, it gives a brief sort of overview of each one of the sort of different factions within the Warhammer 40,000 universe. So if you're new to it, it'll give you like a little bit of an idea of what each faction is about. And then before you sort of take the bigger step into it. So this is probably a very designed as a sort of stepping stone as your sort of first taster of Warhammer 40k. Without going all the way in and spending, £105 on the box. So it's got a little painting tutorial there. Without spending sort of £105 on a combat patrol box per se. It's got a bit of background there. Say the how to paint, telling you really what paints you should buy to do this, what sort of techniques of thinning your paint down, and then apply into, it's quite a basic sort of what we call battle ready standard, where you put like 3 or 4 different colours onto your model and they look okay, but then you can sort of progress from there. And it's got some nice sort of showcase images. Again, this is all I think trying to sell you the world of 40k. This is what you could get, this is what you can buy. So to people who are already familiar with the hobby, perhaps not really targeted at you guys. More so at the sort of, you don't want to sort of spend 30, 40, 50 plus pounds. You thought, oh, I'll just go and spend £12.50 or £10.60, wherever you're purchasing it from, and that really being enough for you. So yeah, it's okay. It's a classic to sort of 10th edition with a sort of Terminator cover there. The one sprue, yes, one of those lightweight sprues. They're a bit heavier when you actually buy the real. So let's have a little look, and I'll build this up then. So we'll start with the Infernus Marine. These are push fit models. So it does say step by step. You look at what number part in each section that it's asking you for. You look on your sprue, and then you find your part number. So step 1A of this one, you're going to need part 8 and part 7. Which is predominantly the main body of the of the Infernus Marine, sorry, begging your pardon, and then his head. I say they are push fit, so this is not really designed for glue, but past experience does tell me sometimes these push fit ones don't push fit. They hold off a little bit. So when you're using your clippers, put the flat edge of the clipper against the model side, and then the sort of V edge of your clipper against the sort of the sprue side, the waste side, and then that will normally give you a cleaner cut off then with less to clean up afterwards. So I've cut off my part 8, and now I'm going to cut off the head, which is part 7. Yeah, it's more or less fallen out that as I didn't really clip through all the way, and you can't really see it on the camera here. I'm a bit out of focus, but where it's cut through, there's a little bit of residue left then, so I'm going to use a scalpel, and then I'm using the back edge of the scalpel then just to scrape that off, and that will get it, again, I'm not quite in focus here, I am sorry. That will sort of take off that raised bit, so when you're painting your model, you're not going to see the raised bits that are left then, the untidy, scruffy little bits that are left. There are what we call mould lines on here. There's a couple of very fine mould lines. This kit is pretty good actually, they're not too bad. I'll check the more body bit. Yeah, you can see there's a little bit coming down there on the sort of flank of the thigh. Again, a light scraping of that, that's more or less got it off. So what happens with these mould lines is if you don't remove them, they'll show up as a little ridge when you're painting, and depending on your painting technique, whether you're dry brushing or whether you're applying contrast paints, the paint will kind of gather or pool either in the recess or catch on the sort of higher edge bit when you're painting. And if you don't get these mould lines off, or you don't get the little residual bit of sprue off, it'll stay there and it'll make your model perhaps look not necessarily, well, some people would say ugly, but it just won't look as smooth or as nice as you could possibly get it by that little bit of extra work of just scraping off or using a file. So the head, yeah, that pushes in and that looks like it fits okay. And then we're going to look for the next part now. So moving on, the next step is the front part of the torso, the rear part of the torso, which is part 11. So we'll just snip that off. And again, we're going to use in the sort of flat edge of the snippers then. That's going to be towards the model side. This is to try and get it as close as you can to the model so you're not have left with too much residue to scrape off. Just going over it again now, just to tidy up that little bit. Doesn't need too much. Yeah, and a quick little look all around the piece. And then, as I say, this is push fit. Is that going to push on? It's holding off a little bit. I'll try and clean up a little bit more there, see if it was just that. No, those pegs don't really want to line up very well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to snip the pegs off, and then I'm going to use some glue then and actually glue it into place. There you go, that's much better. That is, it didn't. So can't quite see here on the camera, but yeah, we'll. So I use Tamiya Extra Thin. So this is a sort of solvent style glue. This is what this is going to do is it'll soften up the plastic, and the plastic bonds to itself then by kind of like melting the very sort of surface film of it. And then when you push them together and the sort of glue evaporates, what I'm doing here now is just using a little bit of glue as I'm using the sort of capillary action. The glue will, because it's so fine, it'll get drawn into that gap to ensure that there's glue on both surfaces. And then you've got a nice tidy bond. So we'll move on to the next step then. So these are the sort of shin greaves. And these are parts 9 and 10. So I'm going to snip them off and again clean these up like I did before. Now you will find as you buy other box sets of miniatures that there is going to be perhaps more options of how to build, whereas this is just your basic sort of get you introduced to Warhammer, get you introduced to the modelling aspect, and some people just like modelling and they're quite happy to buy their kits and build them up, and they'll develop their own techniques and they'll start doing what is called kit bashing, where you combine different kits to create more unique models, so they're not as perhaps the instructions would outlay, but that's as your modelling skills get better. Whereas with these ones now, as I say, the pegs aren't always lining up very well, which sometimes is an issue. You can sort of adjust them a little bit and give them a little bit more pressure, and they will push in, but sometimes they don't push totally flush, which is one bit of the sort of quick build kits that I'm not so keen on. If you're more familiar with kits like Tamiya or Airfix or Revell, those kits have normally got like a tiny little knob on there which sort of line up and push in. Not so much like a large peg like you get with these ones, and they're more designed as a sort of guide to where your piece should be going and how it should fit. But what I'd recommend is you always push the parts or place the parts together before applying any glue, just to make sure that they're resting and there's nothing holding it off that you need to trim, or just to make sure that that fits in. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of warpage with the actual model as it's been produced, with the the sprue as we call it then, with the parts. They've come out of an injection mold, and obviously this plastic is molten and it's quite warm, so the molds get quite warm, and sometimes as they eject it out of the molds they warp slightly, so you will get warpage where the bits don't sit. So that may mean that you'll have to do a bit of extra filing, or you'll have to do a bit of extra filling. You can use there's a variety of different filler options out there, or you can make what hobbyists call sprue glue, whereas you add parts of leftover plastic into the Tamiya extra thin cement, and that creates a sort of paste which you can use to fill any gaps, and then that dries out as well. So now we're going to move on to the arms. This is part 12 and 13. So each one of these arms holds a weapon, the larger one being what is called the Prior Blaster, which is like a big handheld flamethrower, and the smaller one I believe is a bolt pistol. So the iconic bolt gun of the Space Marines, which fire in the lore fire sort of jet propelled projectiles. So it's a bullet which is like a mini rocket really. So this is the pistol version of the bolt gun. Again, I'm going through now just cleaning up the areas that have been connected to the sprue. That's the pistol. As you get into your hobby and more, this becomes second nature, and it won't take as long to do. And as I do more of these videos, I might do a few more of these sort of box and unbuild of various kits, then I'll probably speed up the process here, because whereas it's a good learning process to actually see where I'm cleaning up, but as I say, it becomes second nature eventually then, and people who become more and more familiar with modelling will sort of understand that, that's just a part of the course. You clean up those little extra bits. There's quite a long peg on this arm here, which is pushed in quite smoothly. So yeah, that's gone in okay, that is. So you've got the option there. You could either just leave it as a peg, which pushes in and out there until you've painted, which means you could perhaps paint all the arm before gluing it to the model. So if you want to do more detailed work or more sort of highlighting and shading, then those areas under the arm would be easier to paint. But they're holding in okay there. I'm probably just going to glue them now as they are, so they don't fall off and I don't lose them. So just making sure that it's sitting correctly, and using that capillary action then with this very thin glue, just pushing that in and letting the glue sort of soak into the recess. And I'll turn the model upside down then, so I can get to where the little recess is on the arm that's holding that Prior Blaster, and that'll be more or less done for that one then. So moving on to the sort of final stages now of this model. So we're now looking for the backpack, which is part 14, which is the last piece of the sort of the Space Marine itself before we attach it to its base. So again, I've snipped that off. We've got the sort of bits of sprue again here, which is going to be right on the top of the backpack. So you want to try and get that as smooth as you can, because that's going to be a highly visible area, which will stand out once it's painted. If you've got a sharp or notchy bit or a little bit of sort of additional plastic, which isn't part of the intended sort of finished product of the backpack, then and then there's a little peg there which is very tight. That's not pushing in there. I'm trying to push it into the hole. Well, I don't want to apply too much force, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that peg off, because you can see on the back of the Marine there is a little raised bit for the backpack to sit on, and on the back of the backpack bit there's an indent, and then they marry up and then it sits in the correct position and it doesn't twist around or anything. There's only one way that'll fit on there. So I'm just going to apply some glue in there, and then I'm going to push that onto the back, and then that'll all be in place there. Again, some painters who like doing lots of detail work on their miniatures like to do what's called sub-assemblies, where they might paint the body of the model first of all without the arms on, without the backpack on, meaning they can get into other areas with a bit of ease with a brush. And you get other painters which don't mind all the body parts being on, because that's just going to be a part that they deem as in shadow. So the final bit of this is the base. Now, these bases aren't your standard bases that you'd normally get with a kit of Warhammer miniatures, because these have got sort of like a bit of scenery on there. Then they've got some rubble and some waste, and it's also, for this particular one, it's got the tips of the feet of the Space Marine. Just cleaning the edge of the rim of the base up. I've got a file here just making sure that they're all flat. Now this is a metal file, which can be a little bit harsh. You can get what are called sanding sticks. They go quite fine. You can get them down to, I think it's around about 5,000 grit, which is a really fine level of sanding, and they can be quite small as well. But all these miniatures are very tiny, so you need to be mindful of whether your sandpaper can fit into the area that needs to get into. Again, these pegs aren't fitting in great with this one, so I'm going to snip them off. Now this just might be that this particular mould, that this particular sprue was perhaps a bit warm when it came out of the mould, and it's shrunk or it's moved slightly. I'm just trying to marry it up with its feet now. Yeah, I don't know, perhaps something has warped a little bit here, because it doesn't seem to marry up greatly, but I'm going to glue it in place anyway, and then that one's done. As I say, these bases aren't your norm. You normally get little black round bases, which is made from a slightly different plastic to the standard bases. But yeah, I'm just going to glue that on, and he's more or less done now, I think, this Marine. So I'm just going to hold it there a second, just making sure that it's all stuck. And yeah, he's finished off. So that is your first Space Marine model, which has been finished. Just going to add a little bit of glue in there, just to make sure there's glue on all the contact areas. And then with that glue in there, hopefully this will sit together okay. So yeah, this he's a nice little model. Yeah, and you know, he's if you look at the Infernus gun, he's got you can see that it hasn't got the sort of fuel cartridge in it, but there's a fuel cartridge on the base, which is a nice little sort of detail on there. There's a little bit there on the underside of the holster for the pistol, which I'm not sure is intended. Perhaps I need to file that off. And there's some little gaps here on the sort of side of the sort of shin greave then. So yeah, that's the Marine done anyway. So we move on now, and we'll do the Termagant. So yeah, this Termagant, similar, very few stages with this particular model. He's a nice simple one, only one build option. He's going to push together. If you buy the box of Termagants that Games Workshop sell, I think you get 10 Termagant models in there, and what is called a Ripper Swarm. You're also going to get multiple sort of weapon options, whereas this one has just got the single weapon option, which I think is called a flesh borer, which he's holding in sort of the two front arms of this particular sort of alien beast. So yeah, we'll nip off the first few bits then off the sprue. So we've got part 1, which is the main body. We've got part 5 and part 6, which are the two sort of front arms that are holding the hold the gun as well. So now that they're nipped off, just going to clean up some little bits there. Just get a file because there's quite a flat area on the top of that sort of spined ridge that's coming across the back of the and yeah, that's all off. And underneath the tail where it was connected to the sprue as well, there's a little spot there. You can see there's a sort of lighter coloured bit of plastic, and the final bit which is there. So just cleaning these up again, as I did with Origin. Double check on the arms as well. You've got a little bit under the gun there and a little bit on the shoulder of the arm, which you want to try and clean off. Where it's nipped away, it's quite tight to the sprue, so my nippers aren't particularly fine tipped. You can spend a lot of money on sort of pliers for nipping your models off the sprues. I think one of the renowned ones are, I think they're called God Hand, from Japan, which are very nice nippers, but they're very expensive for what you're getting. Whereas these ones are sort of eBay specials, which are only cost me about sort of £2 a pair. I don't really want to go spending 40, 50, 60 plus pound on a pair of snippers for my hobby when I can just buy a £2 set, and when they go blunt I just buy another £2 set. That's me. Everybody will have their own preferences. There we are. So the first arm goes on, the second arm then connects at 2 points. It goes into the side of the gun and into the shoulder of the model. No, I think there's a little bit, this one's pushed together a lot easier than the Marine was, so you can see there's a tiny little gap there, which I think when I put a bit of glue on and I put a bit of pressure, then that's gonna push up nicely. So say I'll put a bit of glue just to make sure they're solid, and say there's 2 connection points on each side, and then there's the hand going into the gun as well. Say the capillary action for this very fine glue will suck it in. If you're using a tube glue, it's more of a gel type glue, then that obviously isn't going to get sucked in like this very thin cement does, which is the benefit of the thin cement. You can rely on capillary action to just draw it in and draw it along the contact line. Now we're moving on to step 2 for this one, which is part number 4, which are I think it's the back leg, and it's got another front little sort of middle arm. So I think there's sort of 6 limbs on these particular aliens. So we'll nip that off and put that on. So yeah, aliens. These are the Termagants, which are part of the faction called Tyranids within the Warhammer 40k universe, which was the sort of major opposing faction to Space Marines for the 10th edition box, which is what has come out, and that front cover image, which was the sort of half mask of a Space Marine, which is Terminator armor. That was a sort of one of the sort of leading sort of marketing images for 10th edition, Leviathan edition it's called. So yeah, just finishing off cleaning these bits of the model up. I've stopped talking a little bit about it now. As I say, it becomes second nature to you as you build more models to it. Just make sure that all the little sprue lines are off there, all the little additional bits of sprue which have been left when you've snipped away from the main part are off, and then marry them up again. This has got 2 bits, one pushes in the back there, and the other front arm drops into a little hole sort of midway along its body. That's pushed in relatively neatly. So this one's going together a bit better than the Marine did. So I'm just going to use the capillary action now, just to draw a little bit of glue. I've got a small little bit of glue on the tip of the brush. That sucks in, and that's glued. And then we've got the other side to do, and then we're done with this one then, part for putting on its base. So looking for part 2 now on the sprue. This is the final bit here. We'll just nip this one off, and then we'll get this cleaned up as well. say the parts of these models on these smaller screws that can be quite tight to the sprue, so you do need a nice sort of fine tipped pair of pliers. Alternatively, as you can see, I've got my green cutting mat down there, and I've got this scalpel, or you can have your X-Acto modeling knife, and then you could cut down, but always cut down away from yourself towards the cutting mat. So if you do slip, or if it does cut through quickly, or quicker than you're expecting, you're not going to cut into your hand. Bear in mind, these are scalpels. They are super sharp. You're going to cause nasty cuts to your fingers should you slip and go into your hand with them. I've been there. I've done it. I've cut myself. And sometimes they can be quite nasty and they won't stop bleeding. So yeah, you know, if you're a youngster watching these, please make sure your mum or your dad or there's another adult close by. So if you do have an accident, then there's somebody there to help you out. But try and practice safe sort of cutter technique then, or knife technique, where you're cutting away from your body towards the cutting mat, not to other people. And obviously when you're using snippers, there are little bits here which can fly off as well. So be careful, because you know you don't want bits of plastic shooting off into your eyes or shooting off across the room, and you're losing bits as well. You lose a part of the model and then you can't build him. So there he is. He's all put together. Just got to get the base now. So it's the final step of this particular one. It's part number 3. It's again the Tyranids Termagant's base. I believe these are the sort of 28mm bases, and I think that the Marine was on a slightly larger base. I think that was a 32mm base, which is standard for playing the 10th edition of the game. That's the size bases that these models should be built on. So you could substitute this model in as one of your 10 Termagants within your squad once you've bought some more models, or one of your 5 Infernus Marines once you've bought the rest of the Infernus Marine squad, or just a nice painting project. Depends what aspect of the hobby you want to get into, whether you want to play, whether you just want to build models, or whether you want to build models and paint them. And there are some very, very good painters out there. If you're interested in any of that, then have a look at the sort of Golden Demon Awards, which is Games Workshop's awards for sort of the painting competition that they hold, I think, on an annual basis. So these long pegs here now pushing the base, they're pushed in quite well, and it sits quite well there. But what I can see is, because it's a smaller model, it's sitting very low on the base, so you won't be able to get underneath very easily here now to paint the last bit of the model. So what I'm going to do with this one, I'm not going to actually glue him to the base. You can pull him off and then you can attach him on again. So yeah, you're going to end up with these 2 models. These have been nicely painted up by the Games Workshop teams. So you can see there, that's what you could potentially end up with if your painting gets good. Thanks for watching and bearing with me, guys. Please like and subscribe, and I'll try and do some more unboxing videos and some build videos.